Rhys, welcome back to the Under the Influence podcast. It's really, really great to see you. And we getting together today just to talk a little bit about hospitality trends and what's happening out there.
Very much so.
You've been out and about most recently in the Seychelles. You've been in the Cape Winelands. You guys have got a fantastic concept coming to Cape Town. I think for me, it's always interesting to talk about trends because you have to balance the conversation of trends with what's timeless and what needs to be constantly delivered in hospitality, because it is an old, craft and industry to make people feel at home.
And trends are so fluid too.
Totally. So I think it would be really cool as we discuss some of the trends, just to keep going back to some of the truths around how might those trends influence guest comfort, personalization of service, surprise and delights, all these things that have kind of become the bedrock of five-star hospitality.
Yeah.
But what is something that you've noticed in the last year that you maybe want to talk about, and how we can maybe relate it to some of our followers on the continent?
I think the obvious one that would stand out is obviously the drive for what we in the industry look at as ESG,
okay,
right? That environmental sustainable. But I think we can put a pin in that for a little while and come back to it because it's such a big piece that can be unpacked. Something else that's come along a lot, and I think we even talked about it the last time we were together. I think we touched a little bit on the whole experience piece that clients now look for.
Yeah.
Right. So we're dealing with consumers that are much more developed and educated in the hospitality, field in a way where you've got so many more programs, shows on Netflix around the whole culinary piece, around back of house hotels and the experience of being in luxury environments, and we need to be able to step up the game, and it's difficult, it's challenging, so that experience piece is so much more important now, where guests are looking for something more than just a good steak on a plate, but it also at times helps you in some concepts to come back to just a good steak on a plate, because sometimes that is the experience that a guest is looking for, because everything else is a bit out there. But experiential dining is key. You start talking about how small the world really is when it comes to global flavors, and understanding, bringing, you're sitting in South Africa, but you would like to taste Moroccan food. And again, and if I think about Moroccan food specifically, I spent so much time in Morocco over the last, I'd say, 2 years. I've been going in and out of Morocco for the last 7 years within this role, but the last 2 years we've really seen a ramp up of properties and signings, and it's fascinating to know that Morocco just won an award as the most influential food, or greatest food in the planet kind of thing. And when you're really there, I was there recently on a trip with Emma Banks and Dean, and we were, Emma was blown away by how 95% of the products in the hotels are all local from within 40-50 miles of the property. Each region specializes in something. Now, that's becoming a trend where people want to see that and feel that. If you're sitting in London or if you're sitting in New York, they want to feel that, because now they're seeing it on Netflix. Now we're seeing these shows talking about these products. We want to know what a tagine is. We want to see that. And understand the difference. So I think experiential dining is definitely something that's key. But as a flip side, how that impacts then into beverage, how that impacts into drink and cocktail making, mixology, and even into the wine experience. We've been speaking for a while now about Moroccan wine and North African wine, because I always knew that Morocco had a wine culture. I just didn't realize how amazing that wine culture was, and the product available on the market made in Morocco. But then when we started looking at opening hotels into Tunisia, again, I found a new culture of wine, but it's new to me, but it's been there centuries. It's one of the oldest wine cultures on the planet. But it's not accessible everywhere. You don't get to see it everywhere. But I think that whole global at your doorstep piece is something that's really taken over the world at the moment.
I love that, and I think it's also it's about levels. So you can do a full dining outlet which is a huge undertaking. And then, you know, are you able to deliver Moroccan food at the level, or, you know, from an execution perspective? Or you can say, okay, well, in my bar, I've got the opportunity to look at a cutting edge cocktail or drink that's coming out of New York. I want to create a beautiful, for instance, like a Negroni experience. And I'm in Kenya, so I can speak to the guys at Procera.
Yeah.
One of Africa's, one of the world's top gins now, but it's made from the Procera juniper berry from Africa. I can potentially create like a bitter using some of the local citrus and do a little bit of extra work around that. Or I can bottle my own version combined, and suddenly I've got a drink that's both locally relevant, but at the same time internationally on trend. And I think if one can meet in the middle in some respects and create that combination of local authenticity, local product with these international trends, then you are absolutely winning.
So, thinking back to when you were talking about bringing together local influences and ingredients and delivering potentially an international product. So, taking a drink from the US or a drink from New York, and using local influence and local flavor to deliver something new and different. I would echo that with some of the experiences I've had in South Africa recently. Just over the last few days, we've seen exceptional dining from Fane restaurants, from Vada of the Smokehouse. But if you really specifically look at Fane, it's how they take traditional Japanese methodology of preparing food, but they're celebrating abalone from the coast of South Africa. They're celebrating ingredients that are much more relevant to the South African market, right? Embedded into this unbelievably delicate and intricate cuisine. We would then say within Hilton, we echo that in our markets. That's something that we want and what we see, right? So I was 2 weeks in Seychelles, and one of the conversations I'm having with several of the chefs there is, Seychelles is a difficult one because so much product is imported into Seychelles, but there are products made locally. So there is a focus on developing that local produce. But it's also about how do you take a dish and put accents of Seychelles on there. So do we really want to focus on putting a goat's cheese on a beetroot salad when that goat's cheese is imported from France? So from an ESG piece, you're talking about that being imported into the country, etc., where there's a locally made burrata. It might not be at the perfect quality that you want, but how can you incorporate that in? How can you take that product and accentuate it or make it better? There's a piece again around, a bigger focus on, let's say, seafood and fish because it's locally sourced rather than a discussion of importing certain meat products from New Zealand or from America, which again, from an ESG piece into the Seychelles, it's straight away you're talking carbon footprint and everything else. So there's a big focus within our hotels on trying to be as local as possible. We are doing 50-mile menus in most of our hotels where, produce, everything on that menu is coming from 50-mile radius of the hotel. And it comes back to telling the story and the celebration piece too, because when we're operating in a market, be it Seychelles, be it Nigeria, be it Cameroon, it's about celebrating the culture of food and drink within that market, right? But also celebrating that out to people that visit, people that are traveling in. If you're there on business, or if you're there as a tourist, it's helping them understand what the culture of food and drink within that country is. And that's where bringing the best of flavor, profile, local spice, local influence into, like you said, the product, the Negroni, the classical drink, the classical product from France or from New York or from Spain, taking a dish like that, but influencing it and turning it. And another piece that's really fascinating for me is the more guests travel, and I'm included here, the more you learn about authenticity. Now, I think back to the days, let's say 4 or 5 years ago, where I'd be saying, I'm making a Moroccan tagine with some couscous. And, and I would host people at my place, and I'd be having a my resemblance of a Moroccan tagine, and I'd have a beautiful couscous salad that I've done on the side, and I'd sell this as Moroccan. Now, after being in Morocco so much, I can categorically say that it's furthest thing possible from the truth. Couscous is not eaten as a side. It is eaten in Morocco as a main dish with a sauce and with vegetables. So you don't have couscous with something, right? It just doesn't operate that way. That's not how they serve couscous. And then understanding that just because you're sprinkling Woolies Moroccan spice on a piece of lamb does not make it Moroccan. And the consumer is becoming more educated about this. They're traveling more and they're going into countries. So when you're then sitting in South Africa and doing a Moroccan lamb on the menu with couscous on the side, I guess we'll know the difference. People are holding you accountable for authenticity and understanding the trends from different markets and different countries.
Rhys, this is triggering so many thoughts because it's we just hosted with a fantastic chef from the Cape, as well as a chef and writer from Livingston on the banks of the Zambezi. She's got this incredible garden, so we created this menu linked to what's available in her garden.
And I noticed I never got an invite.
Oh, sorry, man, it was sold out. I didn't even get an invite. It was sold out so quickly. But it was so fun, and it triggered this interesting movement there where Annabelle's already been doing this, but Nick came in as a Thai chef and Thai influenced. He hates Thai because Thai food is so diverse and there's so many subcultures and it's literally like a village will have its own way of making a certain dish. So honoring that. But then Annabelle's expertise is foraging in the local sort of bush environment and looking at what's available in different seasons. And then whatever's available in a season is often a bounty. And then that bounty can become like pickled, or it can become dried, or become frozen, or whatever it is. So suddenly he went in there and just like expanded his mind and adapted a menu according to the local bush and also the local fish farm and all these other things. And then he went afterwards just to a lodge quite close by, and he did some training with the staff. And again, it wasn't, I think in the old days it would have been coming and doing, let's teach the staff how to make Thai food. But it's like, again, not relevant necessarily to have a Thai dish on the banks of the Zambezi, but he made it relevant because in certain dishes you can use the fresh fish, then you've got the different ingredients available from the bush. So suddenly it connected the dots. The other element which I love is in the hospitality environment, think about where you can compete strongly by using location. So if you have guests coming into your restaurant environment, and your restaurant environment looks like any other restaurant environment around the world, and you have a white plate or a normal sort of setup from a dish perspective, and you're serving something in that environment, it's in a way you get lost. But if you are, for instance, in the bush, and you are taking something off the fire, serving it out of a potjie pot. Yeah. If you're on the beach in the Seychelles and you've got your feet in the sand and you've got your beautiful, ice cold glass of South African Shannon with that conservation story behind it, linked to the sustainably sourced fish that was fished the same day, and you've got your Creole curry, it doesn't matter if it's not technically the best curry or technically the best glass of wine in the world, even though we know that the quality is high. The context of experiencing that blows everything out the water. I mean, that is where I get goosebumps.
And it links to hyper-local, experiential dining again, right? That whole piece. One of the things that we look at closely now, especially with the launch of new venues and new restaurants across our organization, we do something called guest journey mapping, where you're doing exactly what you just said. You're looking at literally every touch point of a guest through an organization, right? So from arrival at a restaurant, through even before arrival, through booking stages, and every step then from arrival through that experience, where can you accentuate? Where is it possible to make that experience special and different? And that plate setting, as you mentioned, that table setting or experience of sitting down, and what does that look and feel and smell like? That's all important part of the journey. But as you mentioned, a lot of restaurants have the same, right? So how do you take it to the next level? In Africa, we have the opportunity, because of some of our amazing locations and amazing venues and places that we operate in, and very unique environments, we have an opportunity to really tell a different story than the rest of the world. And I don't think we always do it that well.
Yeah.
It is a focus point for us at the moment. It is something that we really are zoning in on and trying to like be a bit more laser focused on how do we celebrate that story. But that whole piece on hyper local, right? You know, and really, as you said, a chef with a Thai influence, but using products foraged from a local environment and turning that into something that's unique. It takes that whole 70s fusion piece, right? You know, everybody, oh, I do fusion
Japanese,
cooking.
French fusion.
Yeah, what does fusion mean, right?
Yeah.
And that term has been, over the last few years, you know, a lot of people have pushed that to the side because it was so blasé, and it was used everywhere. It was used in pubs, it was used in restaurants. But what you described there is what fusion should be about. That's the authentic element of fusing your cooking style from, you know, age-old experience that you've had passed down to you or that you've learned, but using hyper-local products and delivering something that's very unique, but celebrates your heritage as well as celebrates the local products and the locality in which it's been served in. That's superb. And you touched on something else there. You touched on another trend. When you were talking about foraging of products, you touched on pickling. And it's becoming such a cool trend, fermentation.
It's a health trend, especially.
Health trend, but it's also taking roots out of a lot of, you know, Asian pickling, or an Asian style of making produce for extended period of times. You're talking about kimchi, you're talking things like this. But it's becoming something more so important in modern day restaurants. We have a concept we opened in Seychelles called Moulin, and it's surrounded by a vegetable garden. It is on an island in the middle of the ocean, 20 minutes by plane from the mainland. You know, it's 6 hours by boat. Now, in that scenario, we've literally, the team has put together an amazing garden that will go in cycles, right? But it means that you end up with produce.
Bounty or none.
Exactly. And so one of the things that one of the chefs in the kitchen there, and they're an amazing team in that restaurant, Gavi, who's leading that kitchen, and his two team members, one of them specializes in pickling and fermenting. So you walk in, and part of the interior is these pickles fermenting on the side, right? And they're making a big deal of preserving product that they can't use there and then, and turning it into something new and something different for the future, right? Which is huge. And not only to use in that one restaurant, but to use then across the other restaurants in different ways. And with that in my mind, I literally saw the same thing in Cape Town. A couple of nights ago, we ate at Chef's Warehouse. And again, you go upstairs, what's on that wall as you walk in? A whole bunch of pickling and whatever. And then they're served with different dishes as you go along.
You can make your kombuchas for drinks.
Exactly. Although it's not one of my favorite products to drink. But
a rum kombucha has its place. So, Rhys, I think that also leads us into some of the drinks trends. We're certainly seeing some interesting trends related to low and no alcohol or less consumption. So, you know, focusing on by the glass menus. Even some of our wine partners, our wine brands, are just doing such amazing work with organic wines, lighter alcohol, fresher style. I mean, the world of wine goes through all these cycles as well. You know, we've been in the heavy over-oaked Chardonnay world, and, you know, now we're tasting this beautifully fresh, limey Paul Cluver estate Chardonnay. So, yeah, what are some of the things you're seeing on the drinks trend side?
I think low and no is something that is sitting at the forefront of everybody's mind now. It's been a few years since we at Hilton put together a low and no program throughout the region to focus in on that. So you've got even distilleries now making your zero-based spirits and really celebrating a quality product with zero alcohol, because it's something that's become so important, especially with our immersion into certain markets. You know, you're looking at the growth now coming in Saudi, where they are becoming more and more progressive, but also in that market, we need to make sure that we're not just the only option for a non-alcoholic drink is a can of Coke or a Fanta. Those days are gone, right? We need to make sure that we are able to compete and have an experience or a food to drink pairing that is low or no, right? So that's something that
it's not an
key.
afterthought, you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's not an afterthought. It's a curated experience, right? I was at a cocktail bar last night in Stellenbosch, and one of the things that the bar team spoke to us about is that their restaurant next door, which was the same owner, the restaurant next door, part of their menu has a non-alcoholic drink experience, mixology experience, and it's coming from their bar. And the level of detail they've gone to, and it was like with a black garlic emulsion and right, and I'm like, it just shows you how progressive now it has become. That you mentioned kombucha. That's a trend that I think has been around now for the last 2 or 3 years. It's been really there on the cutting edge. Tea is a big deal, like globally. Obviously, everybody talks about coffee, but tea is a massive component now. And also the different ways of using tea is not just as a standard hot beverage, right? It's how can you incorporate that into different styles of drinks and punches and so on and so forth. And as we go along, bubble tea now. That's popped up. That just came into my head. Bubble tea is a big one. So I think the drinks scene is ever evolving and ever changing, but low and no is huge.
It's an interesting one for our viewers who are studying through our courses, just to understand. And I think it's something we need to develop more material on. And it goes back to that, like the layers of this industry, and service. You've got to deliver the basics, hospitality, guest names, personalization, and then the top layer of our industry is care, where you're genuinely operating in that sense of caring for your guest, going the extra mile, understanding exactly who they are, what their needs are, and we've I've got friends who are vegetarian and friends that are, and they're often the first to point out where a hospitality experience doesn't care, because they've got like an aubergine lasagna.
Oh, you're bang on.
Or the non-alcoholic option is, as you say, it's like a whatever, like it's the same cocktail. We just take the alcohol out.
A virgin margarita.
Exactly.
Or a virgin mojito.
Yeah. So it's just it's these things are ways to show guests that you care as a 100%.
And you've touched it with that mention of vegetarian or vegan dishes on menus. They have been over the years. It's been those dishes that the chef doesn't want to put on there, or it's the dish that it's okay, we'll do a vegetarian pasta, or we'll do a like you said, lasagna, an aubergine lasagna, right? But now you have vegan restaurants. Now you have purely plant-based restaurants. And I'm going to touch back on Moulin in Waldorf Plat. One of the early parts of that venue was to really focus on plant-based. So you have an option when you go into that restaurant to have an entire dining experience based purely on vegetables, right? And grown with it. Well, a lot of the components grown on the island. Obviously, a lot has to be imported too, but the whole dining experience is based around plant-based. With, if you're sitting with a carnivore, they can add a piece of meat if they want, but the focus is on the vegetables, the plant-based. And at the same time, having those experiential dishes that are not an afterthought is key. We were sitting in Vada's, the smokehouse down in Spear, and two dishes that came out, two of the most favourite dishes that we had. And we had pork belly and brisket and you name it, it was there. But the favourite dish was the curried sweet potato. And it's two massive chunks of sweet potato, beautiful curry base, crispy onions, a little bit of a chutney, and the balance and the flavor was insane.
Yeah.
But it's what many people would call a side, but that could be a main course any day.
Yeah.
The cauliflower dish they did with a half a cauliflower roasted with olives and butter and whatever. The focus is on making that vegetable or that the key element of the dish needs to be the star of the show. And that's what they've managed to do well. Now, we don't always do that well. And it's something that, we need to focus on, making sure that everyone feels welcomed. Everybody, that transition from turning it from being a afterthought, as you mentioned, to being something that we really think through. So low and no, be it whatever the trend that's coming along, it is important to embrace them, right? And linking back into drink, I would still say, and I'm going to keep coming back to this because it's something that we do keep seeing over and over, is that hyper-locality component.
Yeah.
There's nothing more important. And when we go back into the drinks and thinking about that, if you think currently, we've gone through that gin trend, and South Africa has had an influx in unbelievable gin, right? All over the, and me, I'm partial to gin, and I've got my nice little collection of South African gins. But I think that the next one that seems to be coming is mezcal and agave and agave-based spirits, right? And when you start seeing project like Leonista, and the amazing, not only from a branding perspective, but from a quality of product sitting next to a international tequila or mezcal, it's astounding. And again, it's hyper-local. It's focusing on what do you have on the doorstep rather than immediately going and saying, oh, we need to import, or we need to use Olmeca, we need to use whatever basic tequila we can find.
Yeah.
What is there available locally that we can do instead?
Yeah.
And I think to a certain extent we're still a little bit behind that. It does bug me at times when I walk into South African bars and restaurants and I just see a back bar of purely imported international products rather than...
the bar was usually paid for by those products.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a bit disappointing, and sometimes I ask the team members on the bar, what about South African gin? And they're like, we make South African gin? And you kind of... We're still missing that piece, yeah? And obviously I'm very loyal to South Africa, living here for 7 years, but the produce coming out of this market is unbelievable. And we don't always do a good job of getting it to the consumer and getting it right in front of the consumer. I think so in a way I've kind of answered some of your questions and went around the world and back again.
I'd like to I think I'd like to go back to maybe a trend, the trend of technology and how technology is impacting every business and AI and all these things, and none of us really necessarily understand it, maybe apart from the people in Silicon Valley. We're using AI in our business almost like a personal assistant, like a slightly drunk personal assistant, taking notes and not really getting it right, helping to streamline those pieces of information. But information flow is, in my view, one of the key pieces of success or failure in a hospitality outlet. So with more information flow between guests and staff, and between staff and departments, and then having the space and time to discuss information as a team and how to apply it and personalize and create experiences. Because a lot of hotels that I've been to, they'll have a questionnaire, like what are you into? Well, I love wine. I love snorkeling. And then you never you don't actually have an engagement around that.
No, I get you.
So what are you seeing from a Hilton perspective in terms of like technology and F&B and but not like from a trend perspective, but how is it helping to deliver the basics?
I get you. It's an interesting one because as you know, I've been with Hilton now 14 years, 7 in the current role, and Emma joined the team over 5 years ago now as the VP of F&B brand and development across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And one of the key things that Emma came into the company talking about was F&B tech, right? And how do we not only harness F&B tech, but that, it produces data. What do we do with that data?
Exactly.
How do we use that data? So over the past 4 or 5 years, and Africa was that region where we kind of struggled to get a lot of this stuff in place. I have to say, at the beginning, I was probably a little reticent and a little bit cautious and maybe overcautious, right?
Like a Luddite.
Yeah.
I'm happy with my horse. I don't need this newfangled car.
But also, we always blame Wi-Fi, don't we? Like, across Africa, we're like, oh, sorry, we
That's
can't.
True.
The internet quality is really, really bad. But, it's over the past couple of years, we've really focused on getting it in. And so what kind of data tech are we talking about? If we start, we have a variety of systems that we're now working with. And the key ones, I think, that really feed into the question you asked, one would be YQ. So YQ is a system. Actually, let me go backwards. One would be, let's start with 7 Rooms, because 7 Rooms is a product that is there for a variety of reasons. At face value, it's a table management system and an online booking system, right? So you can link it into your website, you can link it into Instagram. People can go directly into 7 Rooms through a widget or a tag that you make wherever it sits, or on brand.com or wherever it is, and it can link through to a booking page where they can make a reservation for your restaurant. And at the same time, they can put in preferences. They can do whatever they want. But that links directly then into your restaurant, and you can then manage your table setup through 7 Rooms also. So you can then have the map of your restaurant all panned out, and so when the booking comes in, you're allocated to a table. At the same time, it interfaces into your POS system, into Micros, so you can have real-time data of what items have been processed for that table. And you can do it externally also. You can dial into the system and see it from outside. And the final piece of it all is the CRM piece and the marketing piece. So one is the ability to zone in on certain target markets for a promotion, for example, right? Another is to gather some of that data that you were talking about, your preferences. And when it sits in 7 Rooms, and if you have a restaurant in Dubai using 7 Rooms within Hilton, and the same guest goes there and they pick up that profile, then you're going to see the guest preferences. You're automatically going to see that Mr. Alistair likes too much wine, right? Or whatever it is, right? There'll be a little comment about, he likes his Sauvignon Blanc from, or a Chardonnay from Hamilton Russell. It'll mention it on your profile. Or, still sparkling water as a preference. You can literally log this stuff in. So the more data you put in, the more you get out. So that's 7 Rooms. So that's that kind of the guest booking pre-arrival.
Fantastic.
Into.
So it informs your pre-service meeting.
Exactly, right? And then once they're then on ground and on property, another system that we've implemented is YQ. And YQ is all about online ordering. So it's like your Uber Eats of sitting in a hotel, which is dangerous. You know this, because me with Uber Eats, when I'm hungry, my lord, right? I am adding and chucking a side on here, and I'm like, oh, I think I need 4 appetizers. That's the world of Uber Eats, right? Take that thought process and plug it into a room service ordering system,
and you're tired end of the day,
and instead of having to take a menu, read through the menu either on the TV or on a piece of paper, and then pick up a phone and call somebody and explain to someone with potentially maybe a lack of understanding and maybe English language barriers and challenges, and then you're trying to place an order, and then and you can just remember the steps, right? Now it's pick up your mobile phone, scan a QR code, it takes you straight into the platform. You plug in what you want, all the prices are on there.
It's got your room number, it's got your name.
Got your room number, got your name. You plug in the details, and it links directly into the POS system of the hotel and feeds directly in.
So it probably also does, oh, by the way, would you like to add a dessert to that?
Exactly. You can have upselling automatically happen, right? Do you want a side with this? Do you want a glass of wine? You can have these prompts pop up, right? Which increases average check on property. At the same time, though, we use it a lot in room service, but we also use it pool and beach. So think about sitting on a sunbed next to the pool. you know you're miles away from any restaurant or bar in the property, and then the only other option is to have team members floating around continuously. QR code on your little side table, you log on, that QR code there is allocated to a number, they know where it's delivered to. It's not always foolproof, sometimes people move around and they'll order here and then they'll move over there and sit at a table and you get confused, but it's still a system that works to deliver efficiency to a guest and improved customer service to a guest. So that's YQ and 7 rooms. So you're talking about online reservations and online ordering systems.
Those two can I just quickly talk about? So those two tools, I think, are brilliant. And we think a lot about data in our business, and how to use it. So it's often like, okay, is the data right? And then are you using it in an intelligent way? And I think where hospitality professionals need to really hone in on is that pre-service meeting, so where you can actually talk about the information.
Yeah, definitely.
And then also, and this is where I think a brand like Four Seasons, I've only stayed there once, but they've shown me that they do it well, where they choose the right moment to come and engage with you as a guest. So when you're in the middle of dinner with your wife, bad time. When you're at breakfast, on your second cup of coffee, it's relaxed or whatever, there's a good time to come and talk about, some of the, I see, Rhys, that you were interested in maybe having a scuba diving experience or whatever. Yeah. So it's just trying to, talk about it, and all the great hospitality outlets. And it's obviously a lot easier if you're a 10-room lodge or a 50-seat restaurant, but trying to find that space to talk and then
but understanding when to do it,
and also then when to take that learning and those ideas from a guest experience perspective, and then have the right time to engage with the guest. Definitely.
But it's also demonstrating EQ and what they're doing, right? And that's something that we can take for granted easily.
Totally.
And often, unfortunately, the service culture at times is more about volume of team members and too many people at your table, rather than reading the person or reading the table and reading the crowd. So having EQ, and a lot of your luxury properties do this well, right? Yeah. So yes, Four Seasons, for us, it's the Waldorf, it's Conrad, it's LXR. These hotels know the difference, and these hotels have the ability to make that difference in service, but it can be done anywhere.
Yeah.
Some of the best service I've had across the region is in focus service hotels, where you have minimal workforce, but you just have people that really care about making sure that your experience is great. Yeah. Doesn't matter where you are and what brand you work for. Yeah. You're still there to make sure that the guest experience is great. And a lot of that is understanding who your guest is, what are they looking for.
Yeah.
And not being intrusive. It's, service is not about being there every 2 minutes and hanging over a client. It's about understanding what that guest wants. And some guests want that. Some guests do want that across the continent. Some guests want to feel that person there all the time for them.
So if tech and data can help elevate our IQ.
Very much.
But EQ is still the one that needs to help deliver it.
Very much so.
So Rhys, I'm going to quickly, I don't want to get this wrong, so I've got a piece of paper here.
Yeah.
So I was at your conference in London, and just to end off on a great conversation, I'd like to focus in on this. I don't have my glasses. 43% of travelers say they would pay more for certified sustainable travel options. And 78% of consumers value a sustainable lifestyle. Another one is employees want to work with companies that have sustainability at their core.
Yeah.
What does that trend mean for Hilton, other players moving forward, and what are some of the we engaged in one of the projects, but it'd be great just to get your insights.
It's a huge piece, and as we talked at the beginning, as I kept putting a pin in ESG, because I kind of know it's one of those ones that just mushrooms, right? Yeah. It's you pull the thread and it just comes, and it goes off in so many different directions, and funny enough, we can make a direct link straight away into what you're talking about, tech and data. Is that there's so many elements to ESG that we really focus on, and it's everything from
what's it?
Environmental, sustainable, and sustainability and governance, right? So when we really look at that platform in general, we look at everything from what is our carbon footprint, what is our impact on the environment, all the way, and we have 2030 goals within Hilton that are put out there globally, so we understand what we are aiming for, within our ESG model. But at the same time, it's then going down into locality and a hyper focus on what you do in the individual markets. Now, it touches on anything from community outreach and involvement, all the way through to youth stewardship and driving programs that accentuate youth development in markets. It touches on plastic waste and how do we use, from a sustainable perspective, removing plastic bottles from the operation and what is the substitute for that. It then goes all the way through to food waste, for example, right? And food waste statistics are frightening globally. So one of the biggest components we've been really researching and targeting over the last few years is that drive on reducing food waste across the entire region. Now, that in itself, linking to tech and data, we use a system in many of our hotels across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. We use a system called Winnow. Now, this has AI built in, right, at different levels depending on what you sign up for. So at the base level, it is basically a scale sitting there with boxes, different color boxes, and team members have to weigh the wastage coming from production as well as off buffets, as well as from plates, as the operation goes on.
And then adjust your procurement.
And it basically, first and foremost, is you're getting data about how much food waste, and rather than just, a lot of hotels are measuring food waste, but it's in just one number of kilos, right?
Totally.
This system now gives you the opportunity to break that down in a lot more detail, understand where that waste is coming from and how can you control it and reduce it. So stopping food waste getting to landfill, basically, right? The basic system just, you plug in and you put in the iPad what item it is and it weighs and so on and so forth. As it goes up through the systems, one of them actually has a camera that has AI built in and eventually learns. So it actually scans what's inside the bucket and it will actually start automatically identifying items and identifying different products. And it becomes a lot more, so the recording of items becomes a lot more streamlined. But you still end up having data which gives you a point of reference for a chef to use to reduce food waste in his operation. And it makes them conscious, right? And obviously then it also makes them think about how they procure and what they're procuring, right? So Winnow as a company, it has really spearheaded or has supported us in spearheading how we look at food waste across our portfolio hotels. Further than that is then it's how we impact, we link back again to what we do in local communities, and programs that really drive environmental impact. Our Wild Spirit Wine program is built around educating our team members and guests on, yes, this is a beautiful glass of wine, but this is a beautiful glass of wine that comes from a winery that celebrates environmental impact, that celebrates how can they, Waterford yesterday said to me, I can't remember, Werner from Waterford was talking about vines being an invasive species, right, or being an alien species in South Africa. So in return for farming these grapes and making wine, 2/3 of our land is put back into regenerative farming. So regenerating the local fauna and the local wildlife, and that's our stewardship, that's our impact on the environment, which is beautiful when you think about it. And it carries on through to Paul Kluwer.
Yeah, they've got the same model. And then,
same model.
But these farms, the South African farmers, they're so humble. Like, last time we were at Paul Kluwer, they're like, oh yeah, we've got this, school where they're 2,000, and like, what?
Yeah, hospitality school for the local children.
It's sponsored, and
this is, and I think it humbles us when we are a company as big as Hilton, we have a responsibility to make that impact.
Yeah.
And
the power to, you can, what you do is scalable.
Yeah. And I have to say, I wouldn't have stayed this long with a company, 14 years with Hilton, if I didn't believe in what they do, right? And so if you really look at, I'm lucky enough to have been on property as an operator and then moving into the corporate world. And from my time on property, I remember all the initiatives we did with local charities in Nigeria, for example, H Charity, unbelievable organization, and the amount of support we gave them, and we worked with them on a variety of different programs, from upskilling youth to dealing with, clean water into certain parts of Nigeria. And every individual hotel we have in Africa are having these impactful projects within communities, within their markets. So, I hand on my heart can say that we are making an impact as Hilton, as an organization, across the African continent. And not just Africa, right, globally. Obviously, Africa is close to my heart because 14 years on the continent. And that's where I can talk to. But I know that this is carrying on globally through Hilton and all the different initiatives we do. But it is exceptionally important. And there is that piece now, that there's that connection into what a guest wants to see. Guests support businesses that are vocally talking about certain subjects or certain topics.
It's so true, Rhys. And it's not just, I think this is the big message I want to put out, is it's, a company like Hilton can make a massive impact because of the scale, but a tiny restaurant or a small lodge, a small lodge that I know has got some of their staff growing tomatoes, that has a huge impact. Locally grown tomatoes on the village that grows those tomatoes. Having a restaurant in Cape Town that only has pasture raised chicken or eggs, that has a big impact to that farm. So sustainability, there's a lot of room for greenwashing and all those things, but if it's done at every level correctly, you can actually have a huge impact.
Oh, massive. And he goes even further, because if you think about, we've touched on that component of, if you think about environmental, sustainable, and governance, right? We often go into how do we impact the planet, environment. We often go into, reducing water waste, reducing food waste. But another program that's very close to Emma's heart is we're operating a Hilton Chef Inclusion Program, HCIP, and it's all about gender diversity and gender balance within the kitchen brigade, and it's something that has been recognised that, especially at senior leadership level in kitchens, there is a massive imbalance between, female to male balance of senior leaders. And so having a big focus on that feeds into that whole governance piece also. And it still comes into under that whole ESG piece. But across Africa, I have to say, we have, we definitely have a better balance in some aspects up to a certain level in organizations. But once you get into that senior level, we really struggle with developing and growing female executive chefs across the portfolio. And that's something that it needs to be on the tip of every tongue. We need to be really looking at how do we give the platform to give us a fair playing field within what has been a male-dominant environment for a long time, right? And I understand there's a culture piece around it. I understand that, I've again 15 years on the continent or 14 years on the continent. I'm not shy of the challenges that are there, but we really need to move in the right direction. And a program like that, we were recently in Morocco with Emma, and to see our signature Moroccan restaurant at Hilton Tagazout being Imim is led by Chef Maria and a team of women, right? And to be able to celebrate a team of women traditionally cooking traditional Moroccan food of the highest quality, that's something to really recognize and talk about. So it stems in so many different directions, but it's such a massive topic and such an important topic. And those stories that we talk about, be it Hilton Chef Inclusion Program, be it Green Ramadan, where we're driving sustainability and reduction of food waste across the Middle East and any countries where we celebrate Ramadan, all the way through to initiatives and programs like Winnow and food waste. All of this also adds to guests choosing us because of our principles and because of what we do.
Yeah.
And we see that now also in things like conference and events and booking events. They want to know what the carbon footprint of that event is going to be, you know, and it's insane, the detail now. You can, you have a carbon footprint calculator for your event, right, on property, and which is amazing when you think about it. But I didn't think that we would be there. Like 10 years ago, this was unheard of.
Yeah, Rhys, I just want to thank you. And, in closing, I think for me, what you've just really explained so well is that trends are just in the wind unless you have a strong purpose and set of values as an organization. And I would go so far as to say, beyond just organizational purpose and values, but yourself as an individual in your own career, you know where you're going, you know what you stand for, you can reflect that in your service, you can reflect that in the different trends.
Yeah.
But if you just focused on trends, it's just trends change.
Yeah.
But if you have that strong foundation, then you can influence and execute trends, but in an authentic way.
And leverage them.
Yeah, exactly.
In the right direction. Yeah.
Brilliant, Rhys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's great to see you. Cheers.
Good else. Cheers.